Prince Kyrath stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. He was young for a Zaldarian commander, barely 300 cycles old. His purple skin shimmered under the ship's lights, and his 4 eyes scanned the displays with interest. Behind him, 300 warships waited for his orders. This was his chance to prove himself worthy of the throne. The Zaldarian Empire had ruled this part of space for 1,000 years. They had conquered 73 star systems, and each victory made them stronger. Prince Kyrath was the youngest son of Emperor Valdros, and he needed to show his father that he could lead. His older siblings already commanded their own fleets and won their own battles. Now it was his turn. General Thex approached the prince. The old warrior had fought in 50 campaigns and knew war better than anyone. His armor bore the scars of countless battles. He bowed his head slightly and spoke in the low rumble of the Zaldarian language. "My prince, our scouts have detected a vessel in the asteroid belt ahead. It appears to be alone." Kyrath's eyes brightened with interest. "What kind of vessel?" "Unknown origin, my prince. The design is unfamiliar. It's small, perhaps a research ship or cargo transport. No military escorts visible." The prince smiled. This could be his first conquest, small but important. Every great commander started somewhere. Send a communication. Demand their surrender. On the human ship FSS Wanderer, alarms began to sound. Commander Jake Morrison rushed to the bridge, still pulling on his uniform jacket. He was a tall man with short brown hair and tired eyes. The Wanderer was a science vessel, designed for research, not combat. His crew of 42 people included mostly scientists and engineers. Only 12 were security personnel, and they had basic training at best. Lieutenant Nina Brooks looked up from her console. She was the tactical officer, though on a science ship that mostly meant watching sensors and avoiding space debris. Her dark hair was tied back and her expression was calm despite the situation. "Commander, we've got 300 ships on approach. They're big, heavily armed, and they just sent us a message." Morrison sat in his chair and straightened his back. "Let's hear it." The message played through the bridge speakers. The translation software turned the alien words into English. The voice was deep and commanding. "Unknown vessel, this is Prince Kyrath of the Zaldarian Empire. You have entered territory claimed by the Empire. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Morrison rubbed his jaw. 300 warships against 1 science vessel. The smart move was obvious. But something about the message bothered him. These aliens thought they owned this space, but human scouts had been mapping this region for years. No one had claimed it before. "Brooks, send them a message. Tell them this is unclaimed space under galactic law, and we're here on a peaceful research mission. Suggest they withdraw and avoid an incident." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "Sir, they have 300 ships. We have us. I know the numbers, Lieutenant. Send the message." On the Zaldarian flagship, General Thex translated the human response for Prince Kyrath. The prince's face showed surprise, then anger, then amusement. He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "They refuse. 1 small ship against my entire fleet, and they refuse." He laughed again. "These humans must be very brave or very stupid." "General, what do our scans show?" Thex checked his displays. "The vessel has minimal weapons, my prince. I count perhaps 4 defensive turrets, nothing that could threaten even one of our ships. No shields that we can detect. The hull is thin, designed for speed rather than combat. I see no reason they would challenge us." "Then they are fools. Attack." The Zaldarian fleet moved forward. Their weapons powered up, energy signatures blooming across the sensor screens. On the Wanderer, Morrison watched them come. All hands, battle stations. "Brooks, deploy the defense drones. Chief Hart, I need everything you can give me from the engines." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lucas Hart was already working. He was a stocky man with grease on his hands and fire in his eyes. The Wanderer wasn't built for fighting, but Hart knew every system on this ship better than he knew his own house. He could make it do things the designers never imagined. "You want power, Commander? I'll give you power. But if we survive this, remind me to yell at you about pushing my engines this hard." The defense drones launched from the Wanderer's hull. They were small automated fighters designed to protect the ship from pirates or debris. 20 drones against 300 warships seemed like a joke, but they moved with incredible speed and precision. Human AI technology was generations ahead of most alien races, though few people knew that yet. The first wave of Zaldarian ships opened fire. Energy beams cut through space, bright and deadly. The Wanderer twisted and dove. moving faster than a science vessel should. Hart had the engines running at dangerous levels, but they held together. The beams missed by meters. The defense drones swarmed the Zaldarian ships. Their weapons were small, but they aimed for weak points. They hit sensor arrays, communication dishes, weapon mounts. They didn't try to destroy the big warships. They just made them blind and confused. On the flagship, General Thex watched in growing concern. "My prince, we're losing coordination. The drones are jamming our fleet communications." Prince Kyrath slammed his fist on the command console. "They're just drones. Destroy them." But the drones were too fast. Zaldarian weapons were powerful but slow. The targeting systems couldn't track something that moved and changed direction so quickly. The drones danced between the warships, causing chaos wherever they went. Meanwhile, 3 Zaldarian boarding ships approached the Wanderer. If they couldn't destroy the human vessel, they would capture it. Prince Kyrath wanted prisoners to interrogate. He wanted to know what these humans were and why they dared to challenge him. The boarding ships attached to the Wanderer's hull. Cutting torches began burning through the metal. Inside, Morrison gathered his security team. 12 people with rifles and body armor stood in the corridor waiting for the breach. "Remember your training," Morrison said quietly. "Cover your sectors, watch your corners, and don't waste shots. These aliens are bigger than us, but our weapons hit harder." The hull exploded inward. Smoke filled the corridor. Zaldarian soldiers poured through the breach, roaring battle cries. They were massive creatures, each one over 7 feet tall, covered in armor and carrying energy weapons. The human security team opened fire. Their rifles cracked in the confined space, and the first row of Zaldarian soldiers fell. The aliens had never faced human weapons before. Their armor, designed to stop energy beams, couldn't handle solid projectiles fired at supersonic speeds. The bullets tore through metal and flesh alike. The Zaldarians tried to return fire, but the humans used the corridor to their advantage. They took cover behind corners and doors, exposing themselves only long enough to shoot. Every bullet counted. Every shot was aimed. This wasn't wild spraying of fire. This was disciplined combat from people who trained for exactly this situation. In the research lab, Dr. Amy Sullivan was supposed to be evacuating to a safe area. Instead, she was working frantically at her equipment. Sullivan was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. She had no combat training, but she had a brain that never stopped working. She grabbed her sample analysis tools and modified them quickly. The laser cutter she used for dissecting specimens could be overcharged. The acid storage for breaking down organic matter could be weaponized. The electromagnetic field generator for containing dangerous samples could be reversed to disrupt alien equipment. When a second group of Zaldarian soldiers tried to breach near the lab, they found surprises waiting. Acid sprayed from hidden dispensers eating through their armor. Electromagnetic pulses scrambled their weapons and communication devices. A modified laser beam, much more powerful than it should be, cut through the wall and caught 3 soldiers by surprise. Back on the flagship, Prince Kyrath received reports that made no sense. The boarding teams weren't progressing. They were being pushed back by a handful of defenders. Some were retreating completely, claiming the human ship was full of traps and ambushes. "This is impossible," Kyrath said. "We have 300 ships. They have one. We should have crushed them in minutes." General Thex studied the battle reports with increasing concern. "My prince, I recommend we withdraw and reassess. We've already lost 17 ships. Over 2,000 soldiers are dead or wounded. This enemy is more dangerous than we anticipated. Withdraw. After they refused my surrender demand? I will not be humiliated. My prince, pride is less important than the lives of our soldiers. Please let us retreat and study this enemy properly." Kyrath stared at the image of the human ship on his screen. It was damaged, scarred by energy weapons and covered in scorch marks. But it was still fighting. Still defiant. After 6 hours of battle, it refused to fall. Finally, the prince made his decision. "Signal the fleet. We withdraw." On the Wanderer, Brooks watched the Zaldarian ships pull back. She could hardly believe it. "Commander, they're retreating." "All ships are withdrawing." Morrison leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. His uniform was torn, his face was dirty with smoke, and he was more tired than he had ever been in his life. "But they were alive. Get me a damage report. And someone find out if Chief Har." The Imperial Palace on Zaldar Prime rose like a mountain of crystal and metal. It had stood for 1,000 years, watching over an empire that had never known defeat. Inside its grand halls, Prince Kireth walked with heavy steps toward the throne room. His siblings were already there waiting. Princess Sarah stood near the window, her armor polished and perfect. She was the oldest of the Emperor's children and commanded the largest fleet in the Empire. When she saw Kireth enter, she smiled in a way that showed no kindness. "Little brother, we heard about your great victory." "Oh wait, I'm sorry. I meant your embarrassing defeat." Her voice echoed through the chamber. Several courtiers laughed quietly. Prince Vorath, the heir to the throne, stepped forward. He was bigger than Kireth, stronger, and everyone knew he would be emperor someday. His face showed disappointment rather than mockery, which somehow felt worse. "Father gave you 300 ships, Kireth. 300. Against one small vessel. How did you manage to lose?" Kireth kept his face calm, though anger burned inside him. "I did not lose. We withdrew to gather intelligence on a new enemy." "There is a difference. You lost 17 ships," Sarah said. "Over 2,000 soldiers dead or wounded. And the human vessel escaped with minor damage." "That sounds like a loss to me." Before Kireth could respond, the great doors opened. Everyone fell silent and bowed as Emperor Valdros entered the room. He was ancient by Zeldarian standards, over 900 cycles old, but he moved with the power of someone much younger. His 4 eyes swept across the room and settled on his youngest son. "Kireth, explain." The prince stepped forward and bowed. "Father, we encountered a vessel belonging to a species called humans. They refused our surrender demand and engaged in combat. Their technology is advanced beyond what we expected. Their weapons penetrated our shields. Their drones moved faster than our targeting systems could track. Their soldiers fought with skill and tactics we have never seen before." The Emperor listened without expression. When Kireth finished, Valdros was quiet for a long moment. Finally he spoke. "You are telling me that one ship defeated 300 of our finest warships?" "Not defeated, Father. We withdrew to avoid further casualties while we learned more about this enemy." "You ran away," Sarah said from the side. "Silence," the Emperor commanded. Sarah immediately stopped talking. Valdros looked at Kireth again. "General Thek supports your decision?" "Yes, Father. He advised the withdrawal." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Thex has fought in more battles than anyone in this room. If he says retreat was wise, then perhaps it was. But this situation troubles me deeply." He turned to address the entire court. "Summon the War Council. I want every detail of this encounter analyzed. We need to know everything about these humans." Hours later, the War Council gathered in a secure chamber deep within the palace. General Thex presented his report, showing recordings of the battle on holographic displays. The council members watched in growing amazement as the human ship twisted and turned, as the drones swarmed like insects, as the boarding attempts failed one after another. One of the senior admirals spoke up. "Their ship moves like a military vessel, but our intelligence says it's a research craft." "How is this possible?" Thex replied. "We believe all human vessels, even civilian ones, have advanced maneuvering systems. Their technology allows precise control at high speeds." Another council member pointed at the screen. "Look at their weapons. Those projectiles tore through our shields. Our shields are designed to stop any energy weapon in known space. The humans don't use energy weapons on their small arms," Thex explained. "They fire solid projectiles at extremely high velocities. Our shields don't stop physical objects moving that fast. We'll need to redesign our defense systems." The room filled with worried whispers. The Zeldarian Empire had dominated this region of space precisely because their shields made them nearly invincible. Now they learned that a simple bullet could punch through that defense. Prince Vorath stood from his seat. Perhaps this ship was special. Maybe it was a prototype testing new military technology. "We should attack again with overwhelming force before they can deploy more of these vessels." Several council members agreed. Princess Sarah nodded. "Brother Vorath is right. We should strike now, destroy their research facilities, and end this threat before it grows." But Emperor Valdros raised his hand for silence. "We do not know where their facilities are. We do not know how many ships they have. We do not know anything about their true military strength. Attacking blindly would be foolish." He looked at Kireth. "You will take a larger fleet and find their territory. Observe them. Learn their capabilities, but do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Is that clear?" Kireth bowed. "Yes, Father. I will not fail you again." While the Zeldarians debated their next move, the FSS Wanderer limped through space toward the nearest human outpost. Commander Morrison sat in his quarters writing his official report. His hands were steady as he typed, but his mind kept returning to the battle. They had been so close to dying. If the aliens had pressed their attack for just another hour, the Wanderer's systems would have failed. Lieutenant Brooks knocked on his door. "Commander, the report is ready to send. Should I transmit it to Earth Central Command?" "Yes, mark it as priority. We just made first contact with a hostile species and they have a lot of ships." Brooks nodded and left. Morrison leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He wondered how Earth would respond. Would they send the military? Would they try diplomacy? Or would they simply tell him to finish his survey mission and file the report with all the other routine paperwork? On Earth, in a building that most people didn't know existed, Admiral Patricia Hayes read Morrison's report 3 times. She was a short woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded fleets, fought in 2 wars, and served humanity for 40 years. This report troubled her more than anything she had read in a long time. She called her aide. "Get me everything we have on this sector. Every scout report, every sensor log, every piece of data we've collected." The aide returned an hour later with files. Hayes read through them carefully. The Zaldarian Empire had been expanding for years. Human scouts had observed them from a distance, watching as they conquered primitive worlds and absorbed smaller civilizations. But they had never come close to human space before. Now that had changed. Hayes picked up her phone and made several calls. By evening, the Terran Defense Council had assembled in their secure conference room. 12 people sat around the table, representing the military, intelligence services, and civilian government. Admiral Hayes stood at the head of the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation." She brought up a holographic display showing the battle. The council watched in silence as the Wanderer fought for its life. When the recording ended, one council member spoke. "The Wanderer is a science vessel with minimal defenses. How did they survive this?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Because even our science vessels are built to survive. Because our crews train for combat situations. Because we prepare for the worst even when we hope for the best." Captain Ryan Foster leaned forward. He was a lean man with a scar across his cheek and eyes that had seen too many battles. "Admiral, what are your recommendations?" "We need intelligence. Send a scout squadron to locate the Zaldarian fleet and assess their capabilities. We need to know if they're planning another attack or if they're backing off." Colonel Lisa Grant, head of Special Operations, added her thoughts. "I recommend a covert operation as well. Plant surveillance devices, intercept their communications, and learn their language. We need every advantage we can get." The council debated for hours. Some wanted to strike first and destroy the Zaldarian fleet before it could threaten human colonies. Others preferred to wait and see what the aliens would do. Finally, they reached a decision. Admiral Hayes looked at Captain Foster. "Captain, you will take Scout Squadron 7 into Zaldarian territory. 5 corvettes should be enough to gather intel without provoking a major response. Find their fleet, observe their movements, and report back. Do not engage unless they attack first." Foster nodded. "Understood, Admiral." "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning. I want you in position before the Zaldarians make their next move." Back in Zaldarian space, Prince Kirath stood on his flagship again. But this time he wasn't alone with 300 ships. This time he had convinced his father to give him 1,000 warships. This time he would not fail. General Thex joined him on the bridge. The old warrior looked even more tired than before. "My prince, are you certain about this? Perhaps we should wait for more intelligence." Kirath shook his head. "The humans have seen our ships. They know we exist. If we wait, they will prepare defenses. We must act now while we still have the advantage of numbers. My prince, I served your father through many campaigns. I have learned that sometimes patience is more valuable than courage." "And sometimes," Kirath replied, "decisive action is what wins wars. We move tomorrow." General Thex bowed and said nothing more. But inside he felt a deep worry. Something about this situation felt wrong. The humans had been too calm during the battle, too professional. They fought like soldiers who had faced worse threats before. They fought like people who knew they would survive. 5 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the border region. They were small compared to most warships, sleek and dark against the stars. These were corvettes, the fastest and lightest vessels in the human military. Scout Squadron 7 had arrived. Captain Ryan Foster sat in the command chair of the EDS Valiant, watching his screens with practiced eyes. Around him, his crew worked quietly and efficiently. They had done this kind of mission dozens of times before. Go in quietly, gather information, get out before anyone noticed. Simple and clean. "All ships report ready, Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Blake Turner from the tactical station. Turner was tall and thin, with pale skin and sharp features. He had spent 8 years on deep space reconnaissance missions and knew how to stay hidden. Foster nodded. "Good. Hunter, Phoenix, Ranger, and Falcon spread out in standard search pattern. Keep your active sensors on minimum. We're here to watch, not to fight." The 5 corvettes separated, each heading in a different direction. Their passive sensors swept the area, picking up energy signatures and tracking movement. Within 2 hours, they found what they were looking for. "Captain, I've got them," Turner said quietly. "Bearing 273 Mark 8. Large fleet, over 1,000 vessels. They're assembled in a defensive formation around what looks like a command station." Foster studied the display. 1,000 ships. That was a serious military force. The Zeldarians were not playing around. He opened a channel to the other corvettes. "All ships mark target location and begin detailed scans. I want everything. Ship classes, weapon types, communication frequencies, power signatures. We need a complete picture." On the EDS Hunter, Captain Holly Chen watched the Zeldarian fleet through her own sensors. She was a short woman with black hair and quick hands that never stopped moving across her controls. She had grown up on a mining colony where one mistake could kill you. That background made her careful and precise. "Look at that formation," she said to her crew. "They're grouped tight, probably for mutual defense. Classic Empire tactics. Big ships in the center, smaller ones on the outside. They're preparing for something." Her tactical officer agreed. "Probably preparing to attack human space. With 1,000 ships, they could hit several colonies at once." Chen shook her head. "Maybe, but they look defensive to me. See how their shields are already up? They're worried about something. Maybe they're worried about us." On the EDS Phoenix, Captain Marcus Webb was less interested in tactics and more interested in technology. Webb was an engineer before he became a ship captain, and he loved studying alien systems. His screen showed detailed analysis of Zeldarian power cores, weapon arrays, and shield generators. "Interesting," he muttered. "Their technology is about 200 years behind ours. Strong but inefficient. They use brute force instead of elegance." His science officer looked over. "Does that mean we could take them in a fight, sir?" Webb laughed. "1 corvette against 1,000 warships? No, but 5 corvettes could cause them a lot of problems before they took us down." For 48 hours, Scout Squadron 7 observed the Zeldarian fleet. They recorded everything, transmitted the data back to Earth, and prepared to withdraw. The mission was almost complete. Then everything went wrong. On Prince Kyrath's flagship, a young sensor operator noticed something odd on his screen. 5 small contacts at the edge of detection range. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts. He called his superior officer. "Commander, I think we're being watched." The commander studied the contacts. "Human ships?" "Unknown, sir. But they match the energy signature from the vessel we engaged before." The commander immediately informed Prince Kyrath. The prince smiled when he heard the news. "So the humans have come to us. Perfect. How many ships?" 5, my prince. Small vessels, probably scouts or reconnaissance craft." Kyrath stood from his command chair. 5 ships. They send 5 ships to spy on my fleet of 1,000. The arrogance of these humans is amazing." He turned to General Thex. "Can we trap them?" Thex considered the question. "We have a gravity net, my prince. Ancient technology from the early days of the Empire. It disrupts faster than light engines. If we activate it, they won't be able to escape." "Do it. I want those ships captured. I want their crews alive for interrogation. Deploy the gravity net immediately." On the Valiant, every alarm suddenly began screaming at once. Turner's face went pale as he read his displays. "Captain, they've activated some kind of field. Our FTL drives are offline. We're trapped." Foster cursed under his breath. "All ships, defensive formation. Prepare for contact." The 5 corvettes moved closer together, their shields coming up and weapons charging. 1,000 Zeldarian ships began moving toward them like a wall of metal and energy. Foster opened a general communication channel. "This is Captain Ryan Foster of the Terran Defense Force ship Valiant. We are on a peaceful reconnaissance mission. We request dialogue to resolve this situation without violence." Prince Kyrath's face appeared on the main screen. His 4 eyes blazed with anger and triumph. "I am Prince Kyrath of the Zeldarian Empire. You are trespassing in Imperial space. Surrender immediately and your lives will be spared. Resist and you will be destroyed." Foster kept his voice calm and professional. Prince Kyrath, this space is unclaimed under galactic law. We have as much right to be here as you do. Attacking us would be an act of war against humanity. I don't think you want that, Kyrath laughed. You have 5 small ships. I have 1,000 warships. You cannot threaten me. Last chance. Surrender or die. Foster closed the channel and looked at his crew. They looked back at him calmly. No fear, no panic. Just professionals waiting for orders. All ships, listen carefully. We can't run and we can't surrender. That leaves fighting. The mission now is survival and escape. Watch each other's backs, use every trick you know, and make them regret picking this fight. Engage at will. The Zeldarian fleet attacked like a tsunami. Energy beams filled space with deadly light. Missiles streaked toward the 5 human corvettes. It looked like the battle would last seconds, but Scout Squadron 7 didn't die. Instead, the 5 ships scattered in different directions, each diving into the Zeldarian formation from a different angle. They moved fast, faster than any ship that size should be able to move. The Zeldarian weapons mostly missed. Foster's hands flew across his controls. Turner, start electronic warfare. Jam their communications. Feed them false sensor data. Make them confused. Turner's fingers danced across his console. Already on it, Captain. I'm broadcasting fake transponder codes. Half their fleet thinks we're everywhere. The Valiant fired its weapons at a Zeldarian command ship. The corvette's guns were small, but they were precise. They didn't try to destroy the big warship. They just hit its communication arrays, sensor dishes, and weapon mounts. The command ship went dark, suddenly blind and unable to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. Captain Chen on the Hunter led her ship into an asteroid field. Zeldarian cruisers followed her, their bigger ships struggling to maneuver through the rocks. Chen flew like the asteroids weren't even there, threading between them at speeds that made her crew grip their seats. "Ma'am, they're gaining on us," her helmsman said nervously. "Good. That's exactly what I want." Chen waited until 3 Zeldarian ships were deep in the asteroid field. Then she suddenly reversed course. The human ships spun around and accelerated back toward the aliens. The Zeldarian ships tried to turn but couldn't match her maneuverability. 2 of them collided with asteroids. The third one took fire from the Hunter and lost its engines. Captain Webb on the Phoenix deployed his experimental weapons. They weren't standard military equipment. They were prototypes that Webb had been testing for the research division. Small drones that attached to enemy ships like barnacles and drained their power. "Release all drones," Webb ordered. "Target their capital ships." Hundreds of tiny machines launched from the Phoenix and spread through the Zeldarian fleet. They looked harmless, like bits of debris. But when they attached to the alien ships, they began draining power from the vessel's reactors. Within an hour, 70 Zeldarian ships were dead in space, their systems completely drained. On the Ranger, Major Kyle Sanders prepared his Marines for something crazy. Sanders was a big man with a shaved head and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had fought in ground wars on 6 different planets and never lost a battle. "Captain wants us to board one of their dreadnoughts," he told his 12-person team. "In and out, grab their computer core, and get back before they know we're there." Anyone have a problem with that? His Marines just checked their weapons and sealed their armor. They had done harder missions before. The Ranger flew close to a Zeldarian dreadnought. Moving so fast the aliens didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The Marines launched in boarding pods, punched through the dreadnought's hull and stormed inside. The fighting inside the alien ship was brutal but short. Zeldarian soldiers were big and strong, but human Marines wore powered armor and carried weapons designed to stop anything. Sanders led his team to the bridge, shot or stunned everyone there, and grabbed the computer core from their systems. Data secured. Moving to extraction point. Sanders and his team fought their way back to their pods and launched before Zeldarian. The return to the Imperial Palace was the longest journey of Prince Kyrath's life. His fleet limped home, damaged and demoralized. Over 200 ships had been lost or disabled. Thousands of his soldiers were dead or wounded. And what did they have to show for it? Nothing. 5 human scout ships had escaped, and Kyrath had failed again. When his flagship docked at the palace orbital station, his siblings were waiting. Princess Sarah stood at the dock with her arms crossed and a smile that could cut steel. Prince Vorath stood beside her, his face showing disappointment and pity. "Little brother returns," Sarah said loudly. Several courtiers and officers stopped to watch. "I heard you took 1,000 ships against 5. How did that work out for you?" Kyrath walked past her without responding. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Sarah laughed and called after him. Perhaps you should command a cargo hauler instead of a war fleet. At least cargo doesn't shoot back. Prince Vorath followed Kyrath into the palace. When they were alone in a quiet corridor, he put a hand on his younger brother's shoulder. Brother, I need to ask you honestly. What happened out there? Kyrath stopped walking and turned to face Vorath. We underestimated them again. I thought overwhelming numbers would be enough. I was wrong. Are they really that dangerous? Brother, they boarded one of our dreadnoughts. 12 humans against 500 soldiers. They took our computer core and escaped. Their tactics, their technology, their training, everything about them is beyond what we expected. Vorath was quiet for a moment. Father wants to see you. He's not happy. I know. Emperor Valdros received his son in private, not in the throne room. That was either a good sign or a very bad one. The Emperor sat at his desk reading reports and didn't look up when Kyrath entered. 2 engagements, Valdros said quietly. First with 300 ships, then with 1,000. Both times you retreated. Both times with heavy losses. Explain to me why I should give you another command. Kyrath bowed deeply. Father, I take full responsibility for these failures. But I must tell you, the humans are not what we thought. They're more dangerous than any enemy we've faced before. General Thek says the same thing. That's the only reason you're not being stripped of your rank. The Emperor finally looked up. I've ordered a complete analysis of everything we know about the humans. The War Council is examining every second of combat footage. What they've found is disturbing. In a secure facility deep below the palace, the Empire's best tactical minds gathered around holographic displays. They had spent days studying the human ships, weapons, and tactics. The data stolen by Major Sanders from the dreadnought proved invaluable and terrifying. General Thek stood at the center of the room, pointing at various pieces of evidence. Around him sat admirals, scientists, intelligence officers, and strategic planners. Everyone looked worried. Let's review what we know, Thek began. First, the ship we initially encountered, the FSS Wanderer. According to captured data, this was a research vessel, not military. It carried 42 personnel, mostly scientists. Only 12 were security staff. An admiral raised his hand. General, that can't be correct. That ship fought like a warship. I know it seems impossible, but look at this. Thek brought up files from the stolen data. This is a human military organization chart. They classify their vessels into many categories. Research vessels are at the bottom of the combat capability scale. The Wanderer was designed for scientific surveys, not warfare. The room filled with shocked whispers. Thek continued. Now the 5 ships we engaged in our second battle. Scout Squadron 7. Look at this classification. Corvettes are listed as light reconnaissance vessels. They represent the smallest and weakest class of human military ships. A scientist stood up. General, are you saying we fought their scouts? Not their actual military? Exactly. According to this data, scout units make up approximately 2% of human combat forces. 2%. These are the ships they send ahead to gather information. They're not meant to win battles. They're meant to survive and report back. Thek pulled up more files. Look at their weapons classifications. The rifles carried by the Wanderer's security team are listed as light personal defense weapons, suitable for low-intensity conflicts. The armor they wore is called basic ballistic protection. This is their minimum standard equipment, not their advanced military gear. An intelligence officer spoke up. What about their actual military? What do their real soldiers use? Thek showed more files. They have categories called heavy infantry, assault marines, siege breakers, and orbital drop troops. Each category has equipment far beyond what we saw. Powered armor that enhances strength and speed, weapons that can destroy armored vehicles, personal shields. The list goes on. And their ships? Another admiral asked. What about their real warships? Thek brought up ship classifications. After corvettes come destroyers, cruisers, battleships, dreadnoughts, and carriers. Each class is progressively larger and more powerful. A single human dreadnought carries more firepower than 50 of our heavy cruisers. A carrier can deploy hundreds of fighters, each one equivalent to a corvette in combat capability. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the data, trying to process what it meant. Finally, Subcommander Zal, the chief intelligence analyst, spoke in a quiet voice. We barely survived encounters with their weakest units. What happens if we face their actual military? Nobody had an answer. Thex looked around the room at the faces of the Empire's finest military minds. He saw fear there, real fear. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Zaldarian Empire faced an enemy that might be stronger than them. General Thex prepared to brief the Imperial family and the War Council. He gathered all the analysis into a comprehensive report. The numbers were devastating. The implications were terrifying. The conclusion was unavoidable. The next day, Emperor Valdros assembled everyone in the Grand War Room. Prince Kyrath stood with his siblings, waiting to hear the results of the analysis. When General Thex began his presentation, the room quickly grew silent. Thex showed the evidence methodically. Ship classifications, weapon ratings, training standards, military organization. Everything painted the same picture. The humans the Zaldarians had fought were not their warriors. They were scientists and scouts doing their normal jobs. When Thex finished, Princess Sarah stood up. For once, she wasn't smiling or mocking anyone. Her face was serious and worried. General, let me understand this correctly. We sent 1,300 ships total across 2 battles. We lost hundreds of vessels and thousands of troops, and we were fighting the human equivalent of cargo pilots and surveyors. That is correct, Princess. Sarah sat down heavily. Then we're doomed. If their scouts can do this much damage, their actual military would destroy us. Prince Vorath stood. Father, I recommend we immediately open diplomatic channels with humanity. We should sue for peace before this escalates further. Several council members agreed. Others argued for preparing better defenses first. The debate grew heated. Finally, Emperor Valdros raised his hand for silence. We will consider all options. But first, I need more information. General Thex, what is your assessment? Can we defeat the humans in a full-scale war? Thex stood silent for a long moment. Every eye in the room watched him. The old general had fought in 50 campaigns and never lost a major battle. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with sadness. No, my emperor. Based on what we've learned, we cannot defeat them. Not in a conventional war. Our only hope would be to avoid conflict entirely. The room erupted in shocked conversation. The Zaldarian Empire had ruled this region for 1,000 years. They had conquered 73 star systems, and now their most experienced general was saying they couldn't win against these humans. Emperor Valdros looked at his youngest son. Kyrath, you engaged them twice. What do you recommend? Everyone turned to look at the prince. He had been quiet during the entire meeting, absorbing the information. Now he spoke with careful thought. Father, I agree with Vorath. We should seek peace. But we should also prepare for war. The humans need to know we're dangerous enough to respect. Show weakness and they might attack us. Show strength but offer peace and they might accept it. Valdros considered this advice. A demonstration. Show them our full strength but make it clear we want peace. He turned to General Thex. Can you organize defensive positions that would make them hesitate to attack? Yes, my emperor. But it will take time. Then begin immediately. I will not let the Empire be caught unprepared again. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Hayes sat in her office reading the reports from Scout Squadron 7. The intelligence Major Sanders had stolen from the Zaldarian dreadnought was incredibly valuable. It told her everything she needed to know about their enemy. The Zaldarians were strong but predictable. Their ships were sturdy but slow. Their tactics followed rigid doctrine rather than flexible strategy. In a full-scale war, humanity would win, but it would be costly. Thousands of human lives would be lost. Colonies might be destroyed. The price of victory would be high. Hayes called her staff together. The Zaldarians now know they picked a fight with the wrong species. They're probably terrified. This gives us an opportunity. What kind of opportunity, Admiral? One of her officers asked. The EDS Marathon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the border region. Behind it came 3 destroyer escorts, each one bristling with weapons. Captain Danny Morgan sat in his command chair, watching the displays as his ships moved into formation. The Marathon was 5 times larger than the corvettes that had fought Prince Kyrath's fleet. Its hull was thick armor designed to withstand punishment. Its weapons could crack a planet's crust. Its shields could stop anything short of a direct hit from another capital ship. This was what a real human warship looked like. Commander Aaron Bishop stood at the tactical station. He was young for his rank, but had proven himself in the border wars against the Krathari. His fingers moved across his controls with practiced ease. Captain, all ships report ready. Sensors are active. I'm picking up the Zaldarian fleet about 2 light hours away. Morgan nodded. Open all communication channels. Broadcast on every frequency they use. Channels open, sir. Morgan took a breath and began speaking. This is Captain Danny Morgan of the Terran Defense Force ship Marathon. We are establishing a patrol presence in this region. All vessels are advised that hostile action against human personnel or property will be met with appropriate military response. We come in peace, but we are prepared for war. Morgan out. The message went out across space, reaching the Zaldarian fleet in minutes. On Prince Kyrath's flagship, the communication officers translated the message and brought it to the prince immediately. Kyrath read the message 3 times. General Thex stood beside him, studying the sensor data on the human ships. My prince, those ships are much larger than the corvettes we fought before. The lead vessel reads as a heavy cruiser. Based on the intelligence we captured, that makes it a mid-tier combat vessel in their fleet. Still only 4 ships, Kyrath said. We have hundreds remaining. Yes, my prince. But remember what 5 of their scout ships did to us. These are not scouts. These are warriors. Princess Sarah's voice came over the communication system. She was aboard her own flagship nearby. Little brother, are you going to let them insult us like this? They're establishing a patrol in our territory. We should destroy them. Before Kyrath could respond, Prince Vorath's voice joined the channel. Sister, think before you speak. We barely survived encounters with their weakest units. These ships could destroy half our fleet before we brought them down. So we do nothing? We let them claim our space? Kyrath made a decision. We probe their defenses, send 50 ships on a limited engagement, test their capabilities but be ready to withdraw immediately. No heroics. Thex looked worried but said nothing. The orders went out. 50 Zaldarian warships detached from the main fleet and began moving toward the human vessels. They approached cautiously, weapons charged but shields at maximum. On the Marathon, Commander Bishop watched them come. Captain, 50 contacts inbound. They're moving in attack formation but slowly. This feels like a test. Morgan studied the tactical display. They want to see what we can do. Let's show them, but let's not kill anyone if we can avoid it. Bishop, launch fighters. Aye, sir. Launching fighters now. The Marathon's hangar bays opened. 40 small craft launched into space, each one piloted by a single human in a cockpit barely larger than a coffin. These were space superiority fighters designed for one purpose: destroying enemy vessels. Lieutenant Carla Jenkins led the fighter wing. She was 26 years old and had been flying since she was 18. Her call sign was Hawk, and she flew like one, swift and deadly. She opened a channel to her squadron. All fighters, this is Hawk. Orders are to disable, not destroy. Target engines and weapons only. Make it clean, 40 voices acknowledged. The fighters accelerated toward the Zaldarian ships faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. They moved like bullets, like lightning, like death itself. The Zaldarian ships tried to target them. Their weapons swiveled and fired. Energy beams cut through space. But the fighters were too fast, too agile. They dodged and weaved through the fire like dancers avoiding raindrops. Jenkins dove toward a Zaldarian cruiser. Her targeting computer locked onto its engine section. She fired a burst from her cannons. The projectiles hit with precision, tearing through the cruiser's propulsion system. The alien ship went dark, drifting helplessly. Around her, the rest of the wing did the same. They moved through the Zaldarian formation like wolves through sheep. Within minutes, 30 of the 50 ships were disabled. Engines dead. Weapons destroyed. Shields collapsed. Not destroyed, just helpless. The remaining 20 Zaldarian ships turned and ran. They accelerated back toward their main fleet as fast as their engines could push them. The human fighters didn't pursue. They had made their point. All fighters, return to the Marathon, Morgan ordered. Good work, people. That's how you send a message. On the Zaldarian flagship, Prince Kyrath watched the engagement with a growing sense of horror. The human fighters had torn through his ships like they were made of paper. And the Marathon hadn't even fired its main weapons yet. General, how is this possible? Those were fighters. Small craft. They shouldn't be able to defeat our cruisers so easily. Thex's voice was heavy with understanding. My prince, those fighters are equivalent to the corvettes we fought before. Each one carries weapons and technology that surpass our capital ships. We're not just behind in military strength. We're behind in everything. Princess Sarah's voice came over the channel again, but this time without mockery. Brother, perhaps father was right. Perhaps we should seek peace. Before Kyrath could respond, alarms began sounding across the fleet. Long-range sensors detected new contacts approaching from human space. Big contacts. Lots of them. Report, Kyrath commanded. The sensor operator's voice shook slightly. My prince, I count 12 large vessels approaching. Based on their energy signatures and size, intelligence classifies them as human dreadnoughts. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what dreadnoughts meant. These were the backbone of human military power. These were the ships that fought and won major battles. And 12 of them were heading straight for the Zaldarian fleet. General Thek spoke urgently. My prince, we must withdraw immediately. We cannot face this kind of force. Father must know, Kyrath said. Send a priority message to the Emperor. Tell him what's happening. On the Imperial Palace, Emperor Valdros received the message and immediately opened a secure channel to watch the situation unfold. He sat in his private observation room, surrounded by displays showing the tactical situation. What he saw made his blood run cold. 12 human dreadnoughts approached in perfect formation. Each one was larger than anything in the Zaldarian fleet. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy an entire battle group. Together, they could annihilate every Zaldarian ship in the sector without taking significant damage. The lead dreadnought was the EDS Titan, flagship of the human fleet. Admiral Patricia Hayes herself stood on its bridge, watching the Zaldarian forces through her displays. She had brought this fleet as a demonstration of power. She wanted the aliens to understand what they faced. She wanted them to choose peace over war. Communications open a channel to the Zaldarian Emperor, not the prince, the Emperor himself. Channel open, Admiral. Hayes spoke clearly and calmly. Emperor Valdros of the Zaldarian Empire. I am Admiral Patricia Hayes of the Terran Defense Force. I come with 12 dreadnoughts and full authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity. I propose an immediate ceasefire and diplomatic talks to resolve our differences peacefully. If you choose war instead, I am prepared to prosecute that war with every resource at humanity's disposal. The choice is yours. You have 10 minutes to respond. Emperor Valdros listened to the message. He looked at his display showing his fleet. Hundreds of ships, thousands of brave soldiers, the pride of an empire that had ruled for 1,000 years. And he knew with absolute certainty that they would all die if he chose wrong. The Emperor opened a channel to Admiral Hayes. Admiral Hayes, this is Emperor Valdros. I accept your proposal for a ceasefire. I acknowledge that the initial conflict resulted from a misunderstanding on our part. I offer compensation for damages to your research vessel and request formal diplomatic negotiations at a neutral location. Hayes nodded with satisfaction. Your offer is accepted, Emperor. I propose we meet at Nova Station, a neutral outpost between our territories. Both sides will send diplomatic teams. All military forces will withdraw to their respective borders. Are these terms acceptable? They are acceptable, Admiral. Then let this be the beginning of peace between our peoples, not war. The channels closed. On the Zaldarian flagship, Prince Kyrath let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His hands were shaking. He had come so close to starting a war that would have destroyed his entire empire. General Thex placed a hand on his shoulder. You made the right choice, my prince. Calling your father. Waiting for his orders. That saved many lives today. We were so arrogant, Kyrath said quietly. We thought we were the strongest force in the galaxy. We thought we could conquer anyone. We were wrong, yes, my prince. But being wrong is how we learn. Today, the Empire learned an important lesson. Princess Sarah's ship moved closer to Kyrath's flagship. She opened a private channel to her brother. Kyrath, I owe you an apology. I mocked. 3 months after the crisis ended, Nova Station hosted the signing ceremony for the Treaty of Nova Station. The neutral outpost had been built centuries ago by traders who wanted a place where different species could meet safely. Now it served a far more important purpose. It was where humanity and the Zaldarian Empire would make peace. Prince Kyrath stood in the diplomatic wing of the station, adjusting his ceremonial robes. He had been named Ambassador to Humanity, a title that was both an honor and a reminder of his failures. He had spent the last 3 months studying human culture, history, and language. The more he learned, the more he realized how little his empire had understood about their new neighbors. General Thex joined him, wearing his best armor polished to a mirror shine. Are you ready, Ambassador? Kyrath smiled slightly. Is anyone ever ready to sign away their pride? But yes, I'm ready. This treaty is necessary. It protects both our peoples. Your father made a wise choice putting you in this position. You understand the humans better than anyone in the Empire. You've fought them. You've learned from them. Now you'll work with them. The ceremony hall was magnificent. Representatives from both civilizations gathered in neat rows. Humans in their formal uniforms. Zaldarians in their traditional dress. The air hummed with translation devices as people spoke in multiple languages. Admiral Hayes stood at the front of the human delegation. She wore her full dress uniform with all her medals and ribbons. Beside her stood Commander Morrison from the Wanderer and Captain Foster from Scout Squadron 7. Both men looked uncomfortable in their formal uniforms. They were fighters, not diplomats. But their presence was symbolic. They had started this story, so they should be here for its ending. Emperor Valdros arrived with his children. The old emperor walked slowly but with dignity. He had ruled for 900 years and seen many things. But this treaty was perhaps his most important achievement. Not a conquest, a peace. The ceremony began with speeches. Political leaders from both sides talked about cooperation, mutual respect, and shared futures. The words were carefully chosen and properly diplomatic, but everyone in the room knew the real truth. This treaty existed because humanity had proven they could destroy the Zaldarian Empire if they wanted to, and because the Empire had been wise enough to accept peace instead of pursuing pointless war. When the speeches ended, Emperor Valdros and Admiral Hayes signed the treaty together. The document established formal diplomatic relations, defined borders between their territories, set up trade agreements, and created a mutual defense pact against external threats. It wasn't perfect. No treaty ever was. But it was fair, and both sides could live with it. After the ceremony, a reception was held. This was where the real work of diplomacy happened. People mingled, talked, and began building relationships that would support the formal treaty. Prince Kyrath found himself standing near Commander Morrison and Captain Foster. The three of them looked at each other awkwardly. Finally, Kyrath spoke. Commander Morrison, Captain Foster, I owe you both an apology. I attacked your vessels without proper cause. Many of my soldiers died because of my arrogance. Morrison shook his head. Ambassador, you were doing what you thought was right. You were protecting what you believed was your territory. We don't hold grudges. We just wanted to survive and do our jobs, Foster added. Besides, Ambassador, you learned from your mistakes. That takes courage. Many commanders would have kept making the same errors over and over. You adapted. Kyrath appreciated their words. May I ask you something? A question that has haunted me since our first battle. Of course, Morrison said. What would have happened if I had faced your true military from the start? Not scientists and scouts, but your actual warriors? Morrison smiled gently. Ambassador, let's both be grateful we don't have to find out. Foster was more direct. Ambassador, you fought scientists and scouts. Imagine if you'd faced our Marines, our siege breakers, our orbital assault divisions. Imagine if instead of corvettes and cruisers, you'd engaged our dreadnoughts and carriers from the beginning. Imagine if we'd deployed our weapons platforms and automated defense networks. Your empire would have been in serious danger. Kyrath felt a chill run through his body. The humans weren't threatening him. They were just stating facts, and the facts were terrifying. Everything he had fought, everything that had defeated his fleets, was the bare minimum of human military capability. The thought was both humbling and frightening. Thank you for your honesty, Captain. It helps me understand why my father chose peace so quickly. The three of them talked for another hour. They shared stories from the battles, laughed about close calls, and began building the kind of friendship that only former enemies could have. By the end of the reception, Kyrath felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Hope that this peace would last. Hope that both species could benefit from knowing each other. Back on the Zaldarian homeworld, Emperor Valdros addressed the Imperial War Council. The Grand Chamber was filled with admirals, generals, and strategic planners. They had gathered to hear the Emperor's vision for the future. For 1,000 years, our empire has expanded through conquest. Valdros began. We took what we wanted because we were strong enough to take it. But the encounter with humanity has taught us an important lesson. There are limits to strength. There are powers in this galaxy greater than ours. We must adapt or we will be destroyed. He gestured to Princess Sarah. My daughter will lead a military reform commission. We will study human tactics and technology, not to copy them but to learn from them. We will modernize our forces and improve our training. We will become stronger through wisdom rather than just numbers. Sarah stood and bowed. Father, I will not fail you. The Empire's military will become something new, something better. The Emperor turned to Prince Vorath. My son, you will establish a cultural exchange program with humanity. We need to understand them not just as warriors but as people. Learn their history, their art, their philosophy. Only through understanding can we build lasting peace. Vorath nodded. I will begin immediately, Father. Already I have been reading their literature and studying their customs. They are a fascinating species. And Kyrath, Valdros said, looking at his youngest son via hologram from Nova Station, you will continue as our ambassador. You have earned this position through your courage and your wisdom. You saw the truth about the humans when others did not. Guide our relationship with them. Make it strong. The council session ended with a sense of purpose. The Empire had been shaken, but it would survive. It would adapt. It would grow. Not through conquest anymore, but through cooperation and learning. On Earth, Admiral Hayes briefed the Terran Defense Council on the successful conclusion of the crisis. She stood before the same group of leaders who had authorized her mission months ago. The Zaldarian Empire is now a neutral power on our border, with potential to become an ally. We achieved this without a major war, without massive casualties, without destroying their civilization. We showed strength, offered peace, and they accepted. This is the model we should follow with all first contacts going forward. One council member asked, Admiral, how much of our true military capability did we reveal? Hayes smiled. Approximately 15%. They saw our scouts, one cruiser, and a dreadnought group. They didn't see our carriers, our battleships, our siege weapons, our planetary defense systems, or any of our classified programs. They think they understand our power. They don't. Not really. Good, another council member said. Let them think they know. That gives us room to maneuver if other threats emerge. The council approved Hayes' recommendations. Humanity would continue to build its relationship with the Zaldarian Empire, while maintaining its military readiness. Trust but verify. Cooperate but stay strong. It was the balance that kept civilization safe in a dangerous galaxy. Commander Morrison returned to Earth with the Wanderer. The ship had been repaired and upgraded. His crew went back to their normal duties. Dr. Sullivan published her research on xenobiology, becoming famous in academic circles. Lieutenant Brooks accepted a position teaching tactics at the Naval Academy. Chief Hart got his promotion and a new ship, a deep space explorer that would take him to the edges of known space. Captain Foster and Scout Squadron 7 received commendations for their actions. They were heroes now, though they didn't feel like heroes. They had just done their jobs, survived against bad odds, and made it home. That was enough for them. The story of the Wanderer and Scout Squadron 7 spread through human space. It became a legend, a tale told to new recruits in military training. The message was clear. Even the smallest human unit could stand against overwhelming odds. Even scientists and scouts could defeat enemy fleets if they had courage, skill, and determination. In the broader galaxy, other species heard about the conflict between humans and the Zaldarian Empire. They learned that the mighty empire, which had conquered 73 star systems, had been stopped by human scouts. The implications were enormous. Humanity was now recognized as a major power, a species to respect, a species to avoid angering. Diplomatic missions from other civilizations arrived on Earth. They all wanted to establish relations with this new power. They all wanted to